Is Lucius the Adventurer Liko's grandfather? Hey Pokemon Master, PdGaming here. In a homage to Bird Keeper Toby, who unfortunately is going to be leaving YouTube soon, why wouldn't I throw my hat in and at least come up with one of my own theories in the style of Bird Keeper Toby? And while the theory may sound crazy, I do think there is some supporting ideas for it, so let's talk about it. For those who don't watch the Pokemon animated series, especially Pokemon Horizons, who is Lucius? Lucius is a character that we learn about early in the series, first from Roy, and then later his grandfather, and later still from Liko's father's book. He's an ancient hero of sort that went on his own adventure way back in the days with his 6 Pokemon. It's a guy with so much mythology behind him that when Roy's grandfather told Roy about this person, it served as motivation for him to become a Pokemon trainer. He's described as someone great who's traveled through many regions, captured many legendary Pokemon, and found many treasures around the world. Roy starts off the series with a Pokeball that his grandfather found and gave him that allegedly belonged to the ancient traveler, and that alleged became reality when that Pokeball opened up to show that it had a shiny Rayquaza. And as our heroes continued their adventure, they found 2 more Pokemon, a giant Arboliva and a Galarian Moltres that also belonged to the ancient adventurer. This guy is legit. Now all that's cool, but you might be asking, how does that relate to Liko, one of our main protagonists in the series? Well, it all has to do with the pendant that Liko got from her grandmother. As we've come to find out in the series, this isn't some ordinary pendant. In fact, this is a Pokemon Terapagos. And while we don't know much about it yet, both in-game and in the anime, it does seem like it holds special powers because in order to activate any of the ancient adventurer's Pokeballs, this necklace and Terapagos needs to be around. So, how did Liko's grandmother have this? It's not like she didn't know what this was. We learned that in episode 3 of the series that Liko's mom sent the Rising Voltaclers on purpose to be the bodyguard for Liko. You wouldn't randomly do that unless you knew that your daughter was going to be targeted, especially because of the pendant. So how did Liko's grandmother come to hold the pendant and then pass it down to her granddaughter? Something is fishy there. Okay, you might be thinking, the ancient explorer might be somehow related to Liko's grandmother, but how does that make her Liko's grandfather? Here's where I gotta stretch a little bit, but I do think there is some validity to this idea. What's Liko's mother's name? Well, it's Lucia. Doesn't that sound like a derivative of the word Lucius to you? And even the name Liko seems to have some sort of relationship to that name. So you might think that maybe the family has a history of naming everyone with L's, but then the grandmother's name is Diane. That's as far away from Lucius as you can get. So maybe the name isn't from the grandmother's side. Maybe it's from the grandfather's side, who happens to be Lucius. Liko's grandmother is also described as an adventurer who travels all around the world. That sounds pretty similar to Lucius to me, so it wouldn't sound crazy to me to think that maybe both of them met up when both of them were on their adventures. And maybe later on, he left for another adventure or passed away, but left his pendant with Liko's grandmother, the person who he trusted the most, and so she's continuing his legacy by continuing to adventure even at her age. That sounds like a very fanficky idea, and I admit it is, but there has to be a reason how Diane got this pendant. Maybe he isn't Liko's grandfather, maybe he's his great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather. However, I do think regardless, he's still directly related to Liko somehow. That's why I think she was shrouded in so much mystery the first time we saw her. And that could also maybe explain why the explorers are going so hard at getting that pendant. The grunts and the underlings might not know it, but Gibeon, the seeming main boss of the group, seems to have some connection to Liko's grandmother too. Maybe it was some sort of lover squirrel, or maybe he was friends with the two of them. But either way, besides Liko's grandmother, Liko's mother, he's the only one that seems to know why this pendant is so important. He knows the power it holds, and he also knows who happens to have the pendant. I don't think that's a coincidence. All of this now comes back to Liko, who currently has the pendant and currently also has Terapagos. And as we saw in episode 23, Terapagos is seemingly allowing our heroes to see Lucius in visions. It seems to trust Liko implicitly even though she hasn't really done anything with it. It's protected her time and time again without her having to explicitly call it out. And there's a theme in this series about parental connections to our heroes. Maybe it trusts Liko because it was with Liko's grandmother, but that wouldn't explain why it's showing visions of Lucius. Why would it do that if Liko was just some random girl that happened to have the pendant with her? On top of that, the series has seemingly gone out of its way to not tell us anything about Liko's grandfather. Even Ash's father, who was only mentioned twice in the series, at least got some acknowledgement. I think there's just way too much smoke here. Or maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think of this theory. Bird Keeper Toby is one of the few Pokemon YouTubers that I regularly watch, so it's been awesome to be able to do something like this. I want to thank him for the inspiration and all of his work on YouTube. I wouldn't have been able to make this without the countless hours of videos that I've watched from you. On behalf of the community, thank you. So, let's end this video the only way Toby would. Soar high, Pokemon Masters.